Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, Ma'am Ida. I hope you are doing well today. So in here, I am Rifdah Nisa and my partner.
I'm Alya Fajriyah Maryam.
We're gonna explain about three material. The first is non-equivalence. The second is translating an idiom. The third, translating collocation. Regarding the final exam basic translation test. We start from the first part, non-equivalence. I divide into three parts: the definitions, some causes of non-equivalence at word level, and the last but not least, strategies used by professional translators. Start from the definition. Non-equivalence at word level means that target language has no direct equivalence for a word which occurs in the source text. By Baker, 2011, in page 18. Next is some causes of non-equivalence at word level. The first is culture-specific concept. The source language word may express a concept which is totally unknown in the target culture. By Baker, 1992, page 21. For example, she was given a kilt as part of her heritage. The kilt doesn't have a direct equivalence in many languages outside of those familiar with Scottish culture. It is a specific type of traditional Scottish garment. Second, the source language concept is not lexicalized in the target language. By Baker, 1992, page 21. For example, luwak in Indonesian language is a type of civet cat known for producing kopi luwak or civet coffee. Second example, sego kucing in Japanese is a small portion of rice with side dishes wrapped in a banana leaf, typically sold at street stalls. Next is the source language word is semantically complex. By Baker, 1992, page 21. For example, the concept of karma involves the idea that a person's actions in this life and previous lives influence their future life. By Fairweather, 2012, page 18. Next, the source language and the target language make different distinctions in meaning. For example, in English, rice is for general term, but in Indonesian, beras is uncooked rice, and nasi is cooked rice. Next, the target language lacks a superordinate. For example, in English, I often eat fish when I was in Indonesia. In Indonesia, ikan in general term. Ikan laut is saltwater fish, and ikan air tawar is freshwater fish. Next, the target language lacks a specific term or happening. For example, in Indonesia, bambu for general term for bamboo. But in English, bambu petung is bamboo in large type, in bambu apus, bamboo in thin type. Next is differences in expressive meaning. For example, Indonesian, dia seorang artis. But in English, she is an actress. The term artist in Indonesian can refer to both actors and celebrities in general, whereas actress in English specifically refers to a female actor. Next is differences in form. For example, the weather in this region is highly unpredictable. Unpredictable is tidak dapat diprediksi. Same with changeable, dapat berubah-ubah. Next, differences in physical or interpersonal perspective. For example, the first example, The CEO couldn't attend the annual meeting. He is currently abroad. He means beliau with respect because it's CEO. The second example, John didn't join the soccer game today because he has a fever. He in this sentence, it means dia, neutral, because it's John. And the last, the use of loan word in the source text. For example, ada banyak restoran di pusat perbelanjaan baru. Restoran, it means restaurant in loan word. Next, strategies used by professional translators. First, translation by a more general word or superordinate. Translating by using a more general word, known as a superordinate, involves replacing specific terms with broader ones that encompass them. This strategy simplifies translation by capturing the essence of the original term without getting bogged down in nuances. For example, translating puddle as duck or sedan as car employs this method. It's effective for conveying the main idea while maintaining clarity across languages. Another example, specific word or happening, apples, peaches, plums, and apricots. In general words or superordinate, it called fruits or types of fruits. Next, translation by a more neutral or less expressive word. Translating with less expressive or neutral words involves using terms that convey the core meaning without adding emotional or cultural nuances present in the original text. This strategy ensures that the translated message remains faithful to the original intent without introducing bias or cultural misunderstanding. For example, translating ecstatic as happy or furious as angry employs this approach, focusing on the basic emotional state rather than specific degrees or cultural connotations. Another example, an example of translation by using a more natural or less expressive word would be translating the word furious into angry. For example, the source language or the expressive word. He was furious when he heard the news. Dia sangat marah ketika mendengar berita itu. In the target language or neutral word, he was angry when he heard the news. Dia marah ketika mendengar berita itu. And the explanation, the original sentence, he was furious when he heard the news. The word furious conveys a very strong, intense emotion of anger. And the translated sentence, he was angry when he heard the news. The word angry conveys a less intense emotion compared to furious. Next is translation by cultural substitution. Translation by cultural substitution involves replacing cultural specific elements in a text with equivalents from the target culture. This technique ensures that the translated word resonates with the target audience, maintaining the original meaning and cultural relevance. For example, replacing a reference to a specific holiday in the source culture with a similar celebration in the target culture would be a form of cultural substitutions. It requires a deep understanding of both cultures to ensure accuracy and effectiveness. For example, the source text is English. He is as busy as a bee during tax season. The target text, the translated to an Indonesian context with cultural substitutions. Dia sibuk seperti band satu orang selama musim pajak. Next, translation using a loan word or loan word plus explanation. For example, the loan word is cabin. in French. In translated language, in English, it means coffee shop. In English, cafe is often used to refer to a coffee shop. Borrowing directly from the French term, it's a loanword that has been adapted into English, retaining its original meaning but with a slight adaptation to fit English language and culture. Next, translation by paraphrase using a related word. Translation by paraphrase using a related word involves expressing the meaning of a word or a phrase in the source language by using a related word or phrase in the target language. This technique is useful when direct translation may not convey the intended meaning accurately due to linguistic or cultural differences. For example, if a word in the source language has multiple meanings, the translator might choose a related word in the target language that captures the appropriate nuance. It requires linguistic creativity and a true understanding of both languages to ensure that the paraphrase translation maintains fidelity to the original text. For example, the original word libertad in Spanish and translated language into English. Translation by paraphrase is freedom. The Spanish word libertad can be paraphrased as freedom in English. While not a direct translation, freedom captures the essence and meaning of libertad in a way that is easily understood by English speakers. Next, translation by paraphrase using unrelated words. Translation by paraphrase using unrelated words involves rephrasing a text with different words that still convey the same meaning. This is useful when direct translation don't work due to linguistic or cultural differences. For example, instead of translating an idiom literally, a translator might use a different phrase that captures the same idea, ensuring the translation remains clear and relevant. For example, Schadenfreude in German language and translated language in English. Translation by paraphrase is taking pleasure in others' misfortune. This German language is often translated into English by describing the concept rather than finding an exact equivalent word. In this case, the translation paraphrases the meaning using unrelated words to convey the idea of deriving joy from others' suffering, which doesn't have a single word equivalent in English. Next is translation by omission. Translation by omission involves deliberately leaving out words, phrases, or entire sections of the source text in the translation. This technique is used when certain elements are deemed unnecessary, redundant, or potentially confusing for the target audience. It can also be applied if cultural references are too obscure or if the omitted content doesn't affect the overall understanding of the text. This method requires careful judgment to ensure that the core message and intent of the original text are preserved without significant loss of meaning. For example, the phrase "I'm afraid that I made a mistake in read this," but this is a Spanish language, and the translated language is English, and the translation by omission is "enjoy your meal." The phrase in the Spanish language literally translates to "good appetite" in English. However, in English-speaking cultures, it's more common to simply say "enjoy your meal," omitting the direct translation of appetite, as it's not commonly used in this context. And the last, translation by illustration. Imagine you are translating a children's book from English to a language that lacks a direct equivalent for the word carousel. a rotating ride found in amusement parks. Like this, I applied the picture. The original English text. Tom and his friends rode the carousel at the fair. And the translated text using illustration. Instead of struggling to find a perfect linguistic equivalent, the translator includes an illustration of children riding a carousel at the fair alongside the text. Translation text with illustration. Tom and his friends rode a fun ride at the fair. By including a picture of the carousel, the translator let the young readers understand what carousel means, even if there isn't a direct word for it in their language. And next into the Alya's part, which is she explained about translating an idiom.
Okay, let's start the material of translating an idiom. Okay, what are we going to discuss is the definition, the problems idiom can pose in translation, and the strategies. So, what is meant by idiom? Idioms are expressions whose meanings are not predictable from the usual meanings of their constituent elements. They often convey figurative meanings that are culturally specific. So, next to the problems idioms can pose in translation. There is no literal meaning. Literal meaning is idioms often have meanings that cannot be understood from the literal meanings of the words involved. This requires the translator to be familiar with both the source and target language's idiomatic expression. Next, number 2 is cultural specificity. Idioms are deeply rooted in the culture and the context of the language they belong to, which might not have a direct equivalent in another languages. Third, loss of impact. Even if an equivalent idiom exists in the target language, it might not have the same impact or connotation as in the source language. Fourth, complexity. Some idioms are complex and contain puns, jokes, or historical references that add layers of meanings, making them difficult to translate. Next to the third point is the strategies. Strategies number 1 is using an idiom of similar meaning. The words that are used as the formative element of the idioms have the same meaning. For example, the source text is "She's always been the black sheep of the family." In the target text, dia selalu menjadi domba hitam dalam keluarga tersebut. So, the idiom black sheep of the family is translated into Indonesian as domba hitam dalam keluarga, which directly conveys the same meaning of someone who is different or stands out unfavorably within their family. Next to the second strategy is using an idiom of similar meaning but dissimilar form. For example, a translator can also translate an idiom in the source text within an idiom that already exists in the target text and has the same meaning but in different form, or uses different words as a formative elements of the idioms. For example, the source text is he's a busy as a bee. In the target text, dia sibuk seperti semut. So, the idioms as busy as bee compare someone's busyness to the activities of a bee. The Indonesian idiom sibuk seperti semut, or busy like an ant, conveys a similar meaning of someone being very busy. So, the third strategy is borrowing. It is actually unusual that the source text idioms are borrowed in the target text, but in practice some translators use the technique to translate the idioms. For example, in the source text is at the time he will release a new brand for his label. In the target text, pada bulan itu dia akan rilis brand baru. The word brand is a lexical unit in translation. The word brand in this source language has the same form as the word brand in the target language. Based on the meaning, the word brand in the source language is equivalent to the word in the target language. Next to the fourth strategies is translation by paraphrase. On some occasion, a translator encounters an idiom in the search text that does not have any equivalent in the target language. In this case, the translator can translate the idiom with a general expression that represent the meaning of the idioms in the search text. For example, in the search text is maybe he had always been shielded by their grandmother since he was the apple of her eye. In the target text is mungkin dia dilindungi oleh nenek mereka karena merupakan cucu kesayangan. The apple of her eye is an English idiom which according to online Cambridge Dictionary means the person who someone loves most and is very proud. Next to the fifth strategies. Translation by omission. It is possible for the translator to eliminate an idiom in the sense of not translating the idiom from in the search text into the target text. It is perhaps because the meaning of the idioms is no longer relevant to be presented in the target text. For example, in the search text is he let the cat out of the bag. In the target text, dia membocorkan rahasia. The English idiom let the cat out of the bag means to reveal a secret or disclose something that was supposed to be kept confidential. In Indonesian, the equivalent idiom membocorkan rahasia directly translates to leak a secret, which conveys a similar meaning without referencing a cat or a dog or a bag. So, last but not least, translation by compensation. Compensation can be used to translate an expression that is not an idiom to become an idiom, to compensate for an idiom in the search text having been translated with a paraphrase strategy. This strategy involves the translator seeking the omission of the idiomatic meaning in the search language and adding it with a similar meaning in the target language, with lexical form to introduce the meaning in the target language that matches with the context in the search language. The idiom "make yourself at home" in English language is translated into anggap saja such as ada di rumah sendiri, or consider it as your own home. In Indonesian language, make it lost the play of idiom from English language. For another example is, as you can see, kick the bucket in idiom, kick the bucket in idiom, kick the bucket. The equivalent idiom is meninggal dunia atau mati or passed away. In literal translation is menendang ember. This is not used, and the equivalent idiom in Indonesian is simply meninggal dunia or mati or to die. There isn't a direct equivalent, so the phrase kick the bucket is translated into straightforward meaning. Second, piece of cake. Idiom's piece of cake in equivalent idiom is mudah sekali or very easy. In literal translation, sepotong kue, this is not used. So, the Indonesian idiom mudah sekali means something very easy to do, similar to the English or piece of cake. Number third, the ball is in your court. The idiom the ball is in your court, the equivalent idiom is giliran kamu or your turn. In literal translation is bola ada di lapanganmu. This is not used. And the phrase bola ada di lapanganmu is an Indonesian equivalent meaning it's your turn to make a decision or take action. Fourth, burn the midnight oil. Idiom burn the midnight oil in equivalent is belajar or mengerjakan tugas sampai larut malam, or study or work late into the night. The literal translation is membakar minyak tengah malam. This is not used. The word begadang in Indonesian is commonly used to describe staying up late at night to work or study. So, next to the next material, which is collocation.
Okay, next is my turn again. I will explain the translating collocation theory. The first is the definition, the second is problems in translating collocation, and the third is strategies for translating collocation, and the last but not least, the examples. I will start from the definition. Collocation refers to the phenomenon where certain words tend to occur together more frequently than by random chance. These combinations, known as collocations, include pairs of groups of words that often go together in a language. Examples include make a decision, strong fee, or heavy rain. Translating collocation accurately is crucial because they carry specific meaning and nuances that may not be immediately apparent when translating each word individually. Next is problems in translating collocation. There are 5. The first is non-literal meaning. Many collocations don't translate directly because their meanings are idiomatic or figurative. For instance, kick the bucket means to die, not literally kicking a bucket. The second, cultural differences. Collocations often reflect cultural nuances that may not have direct equivalents in other languages. The third, frequency and usage. Some collocations might be common in one language but rare or non-existent in another. Next, grammatical differences. The grammatical structure of collocation may vary between languages, making direct translation awkward or incorrect. The last problem is lexical gaps. Sometimes collocations in the source language may not have a corresponding collocation in the target language. Next is strategies for translating collocations. To handle these problems, translator can employ several strategies. The first is using equivalence. Find an equivalent collocation in the target language that conveys the same meaning. For instance, make a decision in English can be translated to I'm afraid that I made a mistake when I read this in French language. Second, paraphrasing. Even exact collocations doesn't exist, rephrase the sentence to convey the same meaning. For example, kick the bucket can be translated to Hazway instead of trying to find a direct equivalent.
Okay, for the third strategy is contextual adjustment. Adjust the collocation to fit the context of the target language. For example, is for strong tea in English might be translated as the party in Italian, adjusting the adjective to fit local usage. The fourth strategy is loan translation. Translate the collocation word for word while maintaining its meaning. This is useful when a similar collocation structure exists in the target language. For example, skyscraper, sky plus scraper, can be translated into French as great seal or scrape plus sky. The fifth strategy is using synonyms. Replace one or more words in the collocation with synonyms that fit better in the target language. For instance, heavy rain can be translated to torrential rain in contexts where heavy does not fit well. For another example is, as you can see, the number one is example. Number one is literal versus non-literal translation. In English, idiom break the ice. In literal translation is memecahkan es. In Indonesian, which is not commonly used, in non-literal translation is mencairkan suasana. In Indonesian meaning to warm up the atmosphere. Number two, in literal translation is menggigit peluru, which is in Indonesian not commonly used. And the cultural equivalent is menghadapi dengan tegar. In Indonesia means to face something bravely. Number third is frequency and usage. In English, idiom is take a nap. In literal translation is tidur siang, which is in Indonesia not commonly used. In the contextual adjustment is in some contexts, take a nap may be translated as istirahat sejenak. In Indonesian means to take a short rest. Number four, grammatical differences. In English, idioms strong T in literal translation teh kuat in Indonesian which is awkward, right? So a tested translation teh kental in Indonesian is fitting the local usage for a strong T. Number 5 is lexical gaps. In English idiom, give a hand in literal translation is memberi tangan in Indonesian which is not commonly used. And so the paraphrase membantu in Indonesian meaning to help. This example illustrates the importance of understanding cultural nuance, frequency of use, and grammatical structure in the target language to translate collocation effectively. So, that's all from me and Rifdah. Thank you for watching.
Have a nice day. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.